leave this cell with the door open.
What did you say?
You will remove these restraints and leave this cell with the door open.
I'll tighten those restraints. Scavenger scum.
You will remove these restraints and leave this cell with the door open.
I will remove these restraints and leave the cell with the door open.
And you'll drop your weapon?
And I'll drop my weapon.
You
All
may
right.
have some copyright people after that last one.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
So we'll get a baseline. I can't see the chat, so maybe we can just sort of talk. So these were sort of organized A through E, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Do you have any intuitions about which, if any, of these instances of the Jedi mind trick was most likely ethical? So all of them could be ethical, none of them could be ethical, some of them could be ethical. What is our moral intuition about these? Any takers?
You can't answer with your mind. You have to answer
Right. I'm a
out
Jedi.
loud or
I'm
in
a
the
Jedi
chat.
in training. Let's see if I can get the chat to come on. I don't have it on yet.
We can narrate the chat out.
All right.
Who's ready? Farshita, what do you think?
I don't think any of them are ethical, but I think you know how for the greater good is a thing? So like if people use it for the greater good, then I guess that would mean that people would think it's ethical, but I don't think any of them are ethical.
Aren't the Jedi though like soldiers in this war basically? So isn't it just like a tool or a weapon in the war?
Essentially, yeah, but yeah, sorry.
I think in this case, it's like the issue between subversion and coercion. In a lot of these instances, these Jedis are being coerced or forcefully restrained or otherwise kind of like some sort of big bad guy over them. So in a lot of instances, they kind of have to resort to the subversive tactics of the Jedi mind trick in order to evade these bad authorities.
Okay.
So I think in those instances, it's likely ethical.
So that's a different principle. So the first principle was if it's used in service of the greater good. It sounds like the new principle would be if it's used for self-preservation.
Not exactly. In the instances in here, they were mainly used for the greater good / self-preservation. I can't recall exactly which instance wasn't. It was probably one of the ones in the beginning, but like the one in Jabba's palace. Luke went in there to save the lives of Han Solo and Leia, and when the group was stopped and storm soldiers were, I am not up to date with my Star Wars lore anymore, but when they were being interrogated and asked for identification, that would have given them away, and they would have likely been imprisoned. and that isn't due to any sort of like they didn't do it wrong. They were merely the previous like order ruling the galaxy, from what I remember. Like the Jedi Order ruled everything, and then
Mhm.
66 or something came out
Mhm.
and subverted everything while under
Yeah, so
the border.
so to the point that so these are if the Jedi are soldiers in a war, of course in the first episode there's not a war yet. So if we said uh, as long as they're using this tool for the greater good, then it's ethical. We could sort of bring Qui-Gon Jinn's use. It was the first video, right, when he's trying to scam the parts dealer. You could say, well, that's not for the greater good, and so that seems to be obviously unethical. But then there's, so I think all the rest are within the confines of a war, and then as long as they are being used for the greater good, it's okay. But then that can be nuanced because I think Jaden, the video you mentioned is Obi-Wan trying to get Luke through security so he can get him off the planet so that he can go get trained up to be a Jedi versus Rey's just trying to get out of um, the shackles of the ship. So they're both within the confines of greater good, but proximately one is closer to that than another. So
I was just going to ask, what about B? Because B was, I mean, kind of humorous, but B was the one where he's just like, you don't want to sell me these death sticks. You want to go and rethink your life.
So he's helping
Yes.
the person.
yeah,
Right.
that's
So it's a paternalistic Jedi mind trick.
yes. Okay. Good. We'll talk about that because I have a few slides that sort of tease out some of the scenarios. So I'm just trying to get like a baseline here, but then I think that will come up in a later slide.
Okay.
So it seems like there's a couple that we readily identify as being ethical instances of the Jedi mind trick. Maybe there's one or two that we can obviously identify as an unethical instance of the Jedi mind trick. And so what we should do
Oh, go ahead.
is try to tease out
Yeah.
what makes one ethical and or obviously ethical and one obviously unethical. And that's what I propose to do. Alicia, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, Allison was typing in the chat. Is the Jedi mind trick similar to hypnosis, or is it a special skill Jedis can learn? Is it similar? If it's similar to hypnosis, then there are people subconsciously permitting themselves to be controlled. If this is true, then this may border the line of ethics.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know much about the myth of the Jedi mind trick. I know that it's described variously as mind control or persuasion. Most of the like the Wikipedia page will describe it as merely persuasion. So presumably the person or the thing on whom you are using a Jedi mind trick, still has to make the decision to follow the suggestion. If it was mind control, that autonomy would be lacking, and that would probably make an ethical difference if you're manipulating someone or simply persuading them.
It feels like Wikipedia is trying to shine up the Jedi a little bit because it doesn't seem like persuasion.
That's right.
If you guys have, sorry, I just wanted to add something. If you guys have seen Harry Potter, there is this unforgivable curse called the Imperious Curse. And so, well, it's called unforgivable because you're not supposed to use it in any instance, and it's illegal. But Harry Potter does use it in some instances for the greater good too. So I
Interesting.
guess if we parallel that to this, we can see.
That is a talk for July 31st, I believe. Is that Harry's birthday, July 31st or June?
Oh, is that right? Oh.
I don't know. I'm out on a limb here with Harry Potter.
Mm.
But that's a good. But they're similar. So I just wrote a note to myself about the similarities of the two things. Because what makes the Imperious Curse unforgivable is it's total control, right? You take someone's autonomy away.
Mm.
All right. All right. So does it matter ethically for what purpose the Jedi mind trick is being performed? So I think John's mention of the second video might be important here, at least to get us jump started. So that was the video where the hustler was trying to sell evidently drugs, and he used the Jedi mind trick to stop that person from doing that, and then basically sending him home to change his life. Does it matter for what purpose the Jedi mind trick is being performed? Or how much does that weigh morally? Is that super important, not that important, all important? What do we think?
Varshita, you said none of them are justified. You said you could see how some people would say they are, but so you don't think that it matters what the purpose is?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. I mean, like Jaden said, it is justified. Well, I think some people would justify it in using it in war as saying that, it's for the greater good. But then if we use it just like the bad people, then what does that make us, right?
Mhm.
Like we claim to be the good guys, but we still resort to unethical behaviors to win the war. That means we're just the bad guys thinking we're the good guys.
So what about, well, but what about this instance where Obi-Wan is using it not to win the war, but to save this person from self-destruction, right? Changing
Well,
him
I
from a
think
drug dealer to a non-drug
it's
dealer.
up to the guy to decide whether or not drug dealing is a good or bad profession, and I don't think Obi-Wan can dictate that for him.
Hmm.
Does everyone agree? So it doesn't. So the offer on the table is it doesn't matter for what purpose you would use a Jedi mind trick. So that doesn't weigh that importantly or that heavily in an ethical calculus. Is that anyone hold a different view?
Well, the death sticks is an interesting example because he's like, you don't want to sell me death sticks. And by the way, he wasn't going to buy the death sticks anyhow. So it's not like he's like killing a sale. And he says, you want to go home and think about your life. Now, presumably, the Jedi mind trick is over. So presumably, this guy will not sell death sticks that night, or I can't remember when, and go home and think about life choices. But if it's not in that person, I would think to rework their life, they're still going to be selling death sticks tomorrow morning, right? So I don't know, like
Yes. Yeah.
how far, like, I mean, basically all that he's doing is preventing death stick sales that night, right? And then the rest is kind of up to the person. So, but do you think that's unethical, Varsha?
Well, I guess in this instance, Obi-Wan didn't negatively impact the guy's life. But I mean, I feel like there will be an emotional impact on the person, no matter like what the consequences are. You're still gonna remember that one time you went home without knowing why you went home, and it might like traumatize you. You don't know.
Well, sure, but so in ethics, we would make a distinction between the purpose for which something was done and the eventual consequences it actually obtained. And so many ethical theorists would say, as long as the intent was morally worthy, the consequences don't matter. So whether or not that person was traumatized shouldn't factor in if the only thing that matters is the purpose, as long as the purpose that Obi-Wan had was morally worthy, right? So his purpose was to make his life better. If it ends up making his life worse, that doesn't count against Obi-Wan Kenobi. as a theoretical point. Now, we could argue that that is an asinine theoretical approach, but that's how people would split that up. They would say, yes, just like if a firefighter ran into a burning building with the intent of saving you, but ends up killing you because they bonk your head on the stairs. Some people would say it was still morally worthy. Others would say, but the consequences negate that worthy purpose. So I think that's at play in this discussion. Oh, big chat. Let's read this. It's not even all on my screen. I got to make it bigger here.
I didn't realize there were so many more recent analogous moments in pop culture.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can go with you on Harry Potter. Although Vampire Diaries, I think I can handle. So the Jedi mind trick should only be used in select cases where it may be a life or death scenario. Okay, so that I think that speaks to when it would be used, and I think that's one of the slides that I have up. Jedi mind tricks seem similar to compulsion in Vampire Diaries. Yeah. Regardless, Jedi mind trick. So the question again is, what makes the moral difference? So if it's only used, okay, so for you, Allison, it would be compulsion in Vampire Diaries or Jedi mind tricks if they're used in life or death situations, presumably to save life, they would be ethical. Okay, so again, that speaks to purpose and sort of, I guess, maybe a win and a why. So that's good.
Although, Allison, it actually sounds like you got two things in your chat there.
A benefit society too. Yeah. Is that what you're talking about, John? Two different.
Yeah, it's those seem different to me, right? The like benefiting society and saving a life. You could have much lower versions of benefiting society.
Yeah, and it's not a Jedi mind trick, but I think in one, when Palpatine is saved by Anakin, right? When Mace, I don't, spoiler alert, when Mace Windu tries to arrest Palpatine, Anakin uses the Force to save Palpatine, but it's not for the benefit of society, right? Because he goes on to be the Emperor and is, quite oppressive and not a very good ruler. So that would be an interesting split there. You save life, but it ultimately doesn't benefit society. It would have been better off, I think, as Mace says, it's better off if he dies now.
It's a good point.
All right. I'll go back.
I was just curious. I'm sort of asking you this, Professor Fulkerson Smith, but I'm asking everybody too. So I'm struck by this. Is it persuasion or mind control question that you raised a minute ago? So I'm having a memory of being a little kid and going out to eat with my parents, and I'd be like, I think I want the pasta, and my mom would be like, they have chicken. Did you see the chicken? And I said, yes, but I think I want the pasta. Did you see the chicken? And so
you like chicken.
Like, apparently she was getting a cut out of the chicken sales. But I wonder if there's an argument that like that's all it is, that it's just like, yeah, you really, that like it's not a lot different than persuasion. So I don't know. I don't really buy it because I kind of feel like I will tighten those restraints and 1 second later, like I will loosen them and drop my gun. That doesn't seem like secretly I wanted to do that. I don't know. I just was curious about it.
That's a good point. I don't know if anyone's on the debate team, maybe the difference between, well, you certainly know the definition of persuasion, but I don't know what the difference is between persuasion and compulsion. I mean, for me, and probably for you, John, persuasion would be providing reasons in support of a claim that a reasonable person would be moved by, versus compulsion is a little bit more forceful, but nudging is, that's even more gray, right? This idea of nudging.
Well, the thing that's interesting is in B, imagine that you went to sell death sticks to me. And I didn't wave my hand because I'm not a Jedi, but I just went, you don't want to sell death sticks to me. You should go home and rethink your life. And you went, yeah, maybe I will. Like that seems like it.
But he's
Totally
disinclined to
normal,
do
not
that.
a problem.
So so I think the key, I mean, if that, I don't know if it doesn't distinguish compulsion from persuasion, but I think what has to happen, what has to be true is you're disinclined to do what is being asked of you to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
But what muddies that is there were not, although interestingly in that video there were no subtitles, but in the video that you did need subtitles, there were interesting subtitles. Jabba calls his assistant a weak-minded fool, and that's a trope in Star Wars that Jedi mind tricks only work on the weak-minded, which I think raises the ethical stakes because that could easily bleed into taking advantage of someone who's not strong-willed or strong-minded, which seems to be manipulation almost by definition. But maybe it's okay to manipulate people if it's for the greater good, right? That's the idea. Let's see what else we have. Does it matter if it's successful? So this gets to the idea of the results. So we were sort of talking about that in the last slide. Does the trick specifically have to work, or does it have to be? Does it have to bring about good consequences? So if it doesn't succeed, which would be good, it at least can't be negative. So to Alicia's point about the death sticks salesman going home, he at least doesn't do any harm tonight, even if he does harm tomorrow night. So that seems to be somewhat successful. It would be much better if he completely rethought his life and became a Padawan, but we don't know. So does it matter whether the trick is successful? Because Qui-Gon Jinn wasn't successful. Luke was not successful in his attempt to trick Jabba. So does it matter ethically what results from the Jedi mind trick? So there's some suggestion that you all might believe that, since we're talking about, I have notes here, that if we achieve the greater good or benefit society, that would show that the Jedi mind trick is ethical. That speaks to the success or the consequences of the trick.
Can I ask you a question about your question, though?
Sure.
Well,
not a good question.
Well, there's two like what's interesting is there's one thing which is like, what are the consequences? Are the consequences good? But then there's another thing with like, just did it, like literally did I get you to do what I wanted you to do? And I'm thinking of like an analogy where like you're like, I'll sell you this TV for $300 and it's worth $300. And I say, no way, man, that TV is only worth $70. I'll give you 70. And then you go, no, it's 300. And I go, but can't blame the guy for trying. Like that. I mean, that's an interesting question. This idea that like, I'm going to try to outwit you. And if you catch me, you catch me. And if you don't, then all's fair. And so that like no harm has been done because it didn't work. I was unsuccessful in my attempt to manipulate you.
But the motive, yeah. So this question comes from the very first scene where Qui-Gon Jinn is simply trying to affect a beneficial deal, right? A deal in his favor, and he is unsuccessful. And so that's where the question came from. But I was trying to frame it also in terms of the discussion about consequences and motives. But
right,
one would argue, I think we have argued, or at least I have, that Qui-Gon Jinn would still be ethically suspicious because his intent in that very transaction was to take advantage of somebody. You could probably give a beneficial read to that and just say he was trying to expedite a contract so that he could get on with, you know, saving the world or whatever. But that would be charitable, probably too charitable. So success, I think, is really what I was, to bring it to the scenes, what I was asking. But we could also think in terms of the consequences of doing it. Does it matter? So I think most of you would probably say yes, the consequences do matter from a moral point of view. But then John's question is a little bit more interesting. Are you unethical just because it doesn't succeed?
What do you think, Varshitha, Allison? Do you think that if I try to trick you, but I don't trick you, as I didn't actually cause any harm, you didn't go home and have a traumatic experience of not remembering why you went home and stopped selling death sticks?
Well, okay, so remember when we talked about the firefighter and him going in, or whoever the firefighters? Well, if in that argument we said that the intent matters and that is the only thing that matters in order to decide the ethics, here we're saying the the ends justify the means in a way. So first we need to decide what essentially determines the ethics or the ethical quality of a decision, and then we can go on from there.
Yes, correct. So that's the conceit, right? The whole point of this is an attempt to come up with ethical principles in a dressed up as a discussion of Star Wars, right? So if we knew what the principles were, or we knew what the principle was, we could just adjudicate each scene using the principle. But my guess is there's some unclarity. I mean, even I'm unclear always about what the proper ethical principle is. That there's some confusion or uncertainty about what exactly the ethical principle or the ethical principle is, or the ethical principles are. To Jaden's point in the chat, all of the points matter, I think, is probably where we'll end up, which is very good virtue ethics point of view, that everything matters and you have to make the right kind of stew out of it.
Yeah, possibly. It could also matter to the point in which the action takes its course. And what I mean by that is like how far you get with it. If you're unsuccessful with the action, then maybe the ethical point in where you decide if it's ethical or not is closer to the beginning. Let's say if you failed to do the Jedi mind trick against someone, then you can't decide ethically if the result was good or bad, but you can decide ethically if the reasons behind the action were good or bad. And I think that's where we can make more of a practical decisions on certain courses of action. Like we can say let's say overthrowing the Palpatine or something. There's a lot of bad means that can go towards that course of action, but ultimately the result would probably be pretty good, i.e. the stopping of the clone army and all the oppression. And that at that point it would be ethically pretty reasonable to say that it's good to overthrow the emperor. Mm-hmm. But if they don't overthrow the emperor and they do like assassinations against public figures or something like that, publicly elected figures, then that would be ethically bad, considering that in the end there was no good result.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, so keep that in mind. Something you said there, I'll try to remember to bring it up because I think it's going to be important in one of the later questions here. Allison's back in the chat. There's ill intent in a Jedi mind trick. So no matter whether it's successful or not, or presumably also whether it brings good results or not, it's unethical. What's the ill intent? I'm doing this to save the galaxy. Seems pretty noble. Or does
Well,
it?
if we think about that and we think back to the guy with the dead sticks, um, technically Obi-Wan didn't have any ill intent, but if Obi-Wan knew that the guy might be traumatized but still chose to do it anyway, then the intent is kind of blurry because he knows that it might backfire, but he did it anyway. I don't know if people are actually traumatized by the Jedi mind trick, but
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know either. What would you say Luke's intent is when he goes into Jabba's lair? Is that a worthy intent? I'm curious why the intention is always. Allison, I think this is what you're saying. No matter what. Okay, we got ill intent or maybe not considering the possible repercussions of their actions. I see. So you would argue that it's improper not to consider the repercussions of the action. So it's actually, so what would you say if I'm just worried about, I'm just trying to be in control of what I'm in control of, and the only thing I can control is my intention. So I always go into a situation with the right frame of mind. I'm trying to do good, but I'm clumsy and I always end up causing, damage. Uh, what I'm sensing is through my Jedi powers, what I'm sensing is that you're not as good a person as you otherwise could be if you're not thinking also about what might happen. That you're narrowly focused on intention, where as Jaden said earlier, consequences also matter.
I just don't think that someone should hold that much power. I mean, it's true that they might do it and they might use it for good. They might not, but I don't think that anyone should be able to control anyone else. That's where I think like no matter it doesn't matter if your intent is good or bad, you can't decide a person's thoughts or actions for them. You should let them decide on their own.
What about when John and his mom go out to dinner and she just says you're getting chicken?
Well, that's because he was a child and,
Oh no,
children think differently.
he's talking about last Wednesday's dinner is what he's talking about.
Oh, I
He
thought
frames it as when he was a kid. It was just last week.
It's happens all the time. Jaden, are you trying to get in? Is that a hand you're
Yeah.
raising?
Oh, sorry.
I do have a counter to that kind of argument is the soldiers that are usually the ones doing these sorts of actions against the Jedi, they are also being coerced often to do their actions. I think the clones even were genetically and like mechanically like almost required to follow the orders
Oh
of
yeah, that's why they're.
Sith. So in the end, like a lot of these people that they're fighting, doing, they're often being under some other force other than the Jedi. So is the Jedi doing anything? So in the end, the Jedi could be, in fact, improving the quality of life and freedom of some of these people by basically just telling them you don't need to follow the Sith anymore, in effect.
okay, well the stormtroopers might be reprimanded if the guy that had to let go Obi-Wan and Luke in the thing. I don't remember which video it was, but Obi-Wan convinced him that they didn't need to see their identification or whatever. That the stormtrooper might be reprimanded later by higher officials for letting them go. And I think that in this case, they're not trying to help, they're just serving their own purpose. If they actually help the stormtroopers overcome their mental state of like confusion, then it's fine. But that's not what's happening here.
But Varshitha, do you think that it's wrong to blow up the Death Star?
No, I didn't say that. I
Well,
just think it's wrong to use unfair means to, you know, do your bidding.
but so help me with that one, because it seems like killing many people is maybe just as bad, if not worse, than being like, let me go.
Well, ideally, you don't kill anyone and you imprison everyone that's bad, but that's not realistic, right? That in that case, it would be wrong for us to bomb Germany and like try to, win the war against Hitler, but there are casualties in most wars.
Yeah,
So
so I think
I
I
don't
think
know. I
that's an
don't know how to.
interesting.
Yeah.
There's an interesting distinction there, and that is the Jedi could just come busting in with their lightsabers on and slice everybody up, or they could attempt to achieve the same goal by using a less brutal method. And there may be something to be said for one being the morally preferable course of action. Um, so that's an interesting question, which takes us into this slide. Doesn't matter ethically when the Jedi mind trick is deployed as a first option or a last resort, because it's kind of getting at the how you're going to go about doing something, right? So we've talked about intention, we've talked about the consequences, and now we can sort of think about how you're doing whatever it is you intend to do to bring about a certain consequence. So, for example, if you're trying to win the war, are you just going to blast everybody to kingdom come, or are you going to try to persuade them to lay down their arms? And if one is morally preferable, when do you do it? Do you start with the persuasion and end with the force? Do you start with the force and end with more force? So what do we think about the Jedi mind trick being a first or a last resort?
I think with the war analogy, when we had the choice between persuading someone to lay down their arms or killing everyone, I think in that case, if we do deploy the Jedi mind trick and use that to persuade a mass, and eventually they get out of their like the mind control phase, and then eventually they realize that they were tricked, that's going to cause a rebellion anyway. So in that case, it would be better to kill everyone. I don't know. I do understand it seems like a drastic change in my opinion, but yeah, that's what I think. Since in the end, everyone's gonna have to die anyway. So
Yeah, I was thinking a little less macabre. I was just thinking like it seems pretty lazy that the Jedi mind trick is lazy. So again, I'm going back to the Qui-Gon Jinn. He could have just simply engaged in negotiations with the parts seller, and but that takes effort and time. And the very first thing he does is try to persuade him to give him the parts at little to no cost. And that seems, for me, morally suspect that you would take the easy way out, that there's something morally, that there's something about the struggle maybe that factors into morality. But that's what I was thinking with the question.
So for you, Brett, the E, when Ray gets freed, is very different from A, because she's in chains. She could be killed by Kylo Ren. She's, this is it. The gig is up. She's got to In fact, it's like she discovers she has the ability in that very moment to do it. It's her last gasp. So that's total. You would say that's, and it's not just because it's saving her life, but because it's like, I've tried everything else.
Yeah, to the extent that that's true, that she has tried everything else. But I think that's a good contrast, that Rey's use of Jedi mind trick is at a very different moment in that engagement than Qui-Gon Jinn's, and I think there's a moral difference there that captures. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Mm.
You disagree?
No, I agree. And I'm curious, I'm trying to think about the other clips and where they fit into that. Like, I think you could argue it seems lazy when Obi-Wan does it when the guards are like looking for the droids, but I actually think like not really, because if that goes any other way, they're immediately arrested and they're killed, and that's the end of that. And so it is high stakes, right?
Yeah.
Um,
In a way that Qui-Gon Jinn's is not high stakes, right? I mean,
Right.
nothing's at stake there. Because you could say that Luke and the droids and Obi-Wan should have like tried to disguise themselves and sneak into Mos Eisley, the cantina, undercover. But if they were found out, they'd be dead, right, or
Mhm.
imprisoned. So that, I think you're right. That's high stakes, which makes it different. What are the other ones? I can't think of the other ones. It's a little less clear when Luke comes to save Princess Leia in Jabba's lair, right? He doesn't try any negotiation. He doesn't do anything. He leads with Jedi mind trick, and one might wonder if that which one that's closer to, the first clip or the last clip.
Well, he can't get to Jabba unless he can convince the guy to let him in, right? But weirdly, he just like chokes out the other two guys first. He doesn't even
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about the force choke. Yeah.
immediate violence right out of the gate.
Yeah, and he has his sword there, but that would have given him away, right? I guess if he
Presumably.
used his lightsaber. But he tries to use what's missing in that scene are the subtitles that are in the movies. I don't know why. Maybe I just cut the clip so you couldn't see the subtitles. But he's trying to use the mind trick on Jabba the Hutt, and Jabba the Hutt isn't susceptible to it in the same way that the guy in that is it whatever his name is in the first scene.
Watto, yeah, Watto.
Yeah, the flying parts dealer. But he's trying to use it on Jabba, and Jabba says, "Ha ha ha! It doesn't work on me." But that's a first option, and so I don't know if it's more similar to getting into the cantina or past the guards, or if it's more like Qui-Gon Jinn, just sort of taking the easy, lazy way out. But I think it matters somehow how you're doing it or when you're doing it. And this is what I was thinking with one of Jaden's chats. I think this would be the context. One of the comments earlier. I can't remember which one. Oh, maybe it's in a lot of ways, all the points matter. This would be a new way, right? How or when you're doing it, not why you're doing it, not what happens after you do it, but when and how you're doing it.
I do have one thing I also want to add. In like considering all the other options the Jedi could have employed, this is arguably one of the more ethically and peaceful options. In a lot of ways, the Jedi could be doing the same tactics that the Sith did, i.e., like assassinating people, throwing military coups, subversive, like widely subversive and coercive actions. But in a lot of ways, the Jedi mind trick is a lot more peaceful than simply fighting people with lightsabers and with giant ships causing hundreds, thousands of casualties. So I think this kind of brings into question, like, is it ethical to fight the reigning authority? Because I'd say in this case, it is ethical. But then you have to say, like, the methods involved. And I think other than throwing up like picket fences and protesting, which I don't think the Emperor allows, the Jedi mind trick is arguably one of the way more peaceful but also achieves the end goal of bringing back the Republic.
Interesting.
So I,
Yeah,
I,
well,
I think
I think you have hit on an answer to the question why it's only the Jedi who have it. So if you remember, the Jedi like the lightsabers because they're more humane and elegant tools. Uh, so the mind trick is even more humane than that, right? So they don't like blasters because they're barbaric. So it seems like everything they're doing is trying to be humane and as peaceful as possible. So the Jedi, you would imagine that the Jedi's would have the Jedi mind trick precisely because it's a humane option, right? It's the least violent of the things they have at their disposal. Presumably, it doesn't cause any long-lasting trauma. Whereas the Sith don't seem to have it. I could be wrong, but I don't recall seeing it used by any Sith. But of course, their whole point is destruction and inhumanity. And so you could imagine that that's the reason they don't have this power is because it's too humane for them. They are much more for the force lightning and force push. It's interesting why Luke does force choke on the guards at Jabba the Hutt's lair. But I think you've written a thesis as to why this is a uniquely Jedi power because of its humaneness, and maybe that's justifies its use. It is if it is the most humane option, then you are ethically permitted to use it, maybe whenever. So that's an interesting point.
I have a question. In that case, does that mean that emotional trauma is less violent than physical trauma?
Oh, well, I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure what I would say in general. I probably wouldn't say that in general. But um, are you probing whether Force Jedi mind trick is emotionally traumatizing? Is that
Yeah,
the?
yeah. Well, we don't know, but
Yeah,
I was
that's
just
true.
wondering. Yeah.
But I would say they're at least. I would argue personally that they're at least equally morally important, and I might even consider emotional trauma more significant than physical trauma, given the consequences of that.
But we,
Cuts
it's, you know,
heal, emotional trauma doesn't.
it does seem a leap. I commend your compassion, Varshita, but there's nothing that seems to indicate that the Jabba's guard wakes up the next day and he's just like, oh, I'm the worst. I can't believe I fell for that. Like, and he just is like completely feels violated. Um, but there's something that you're getting at that really interests me, Varshita, about like how you said that you're okay with blowing up a Death Star, but not with a Jedi mind trick. And I wonder what you think about like this. That originally I was thinking, okay, it's war, so you can do whatever in wartime, like whatever tactics you need to do. You can plant a little bomb, you get a spy, you do this, okay. But then I was thinking, there's sort of rules of, and so I could see an argument that like, look, I'm going to try to kill you, and you're going to try to kill me, and that's fair. But the Jedi mind trick, nobody has agreed to the Jedi mind trick. Like that's not under the parameters of our just war fighting. Like you're gonna try to blow up my stuff, I'm gonna try to blow up your stuff. All good, and that's a fair war. And your little sneaky Jedi mind tricks. That's not cool. Is that what you're getting at? That like there's something about the like the unfair power of the Jedi mind trick that's like somehow different than conventional warfare.
Yeah, I just think that no one deserves to have their mind controlled. And I mean, if we draw a parallel to our world and think that, like, I don't know, if, for example, let's say one of us was a Jedi and we had the chance to control Adolf Hitler's mind and try to get him to like surrender or something. I don't know. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that.
By the way, this
I
is
know
not
that
dissimilar.
sounds controversial, but
That's
This is not
controversial.
dissimilar to some of the conversations about torture.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is there ever an appropriate form in which to use torture? And I think that one of the ethical ways out of that is like it's not effective anyhow, because when people are tortured, they'll say anything. They're not necessarily revealing truths, right? But I mean, there is a whole like there are really this is controversial, right? There is a whole school of thought that like, look, if it's finding out where the nuclear bomb is hidden like in New York City, you torture that person, right? Whereas then there's the camp is like, no, that's just not who we are. Like we don't like that we agree that I think the Geneva Convention, right, says that you can't torture, right? So it is kind of an interesting, like what is the line that you don't cross in war? But I would say that the Jedi mind trick is in most cases, I would say, more benign than torture. But I take your point, like to you, there's something just distinctive about mind control, right? And of course, the classic kind of crossover sci-fi example of this is when Picard is held hostage, right? And they try to brainwash him, right? In the end, right? So he's held hostage by Kardashian, who keeps trying to get him to say that there are three lights when there are four lights, right? And at the end, when he's freed, he goes back and goes, "There are four lights," right? Like that he still has his mind. Oh, I'm sorry. So,
You're in the Star Trek. Uh,
well, I know, but
But
I mean, I like Star Wars too, but I do think that like it was an interesting example, kind of like touching on the real world example. I'm sorry, it's a realtor. Oh, I'll let it go to my voicemail. Um, uh, that there is this like crossover of like he is tortured, and that the goal is to get him to basically be brainwashed, right? That he will submit to this Kardashian this Cardassian, sorry, this Cardassian general's wishes, right? So, but he will not. He will not. He would rather die, right? He starves rather than submit to it. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting analogy that the Jedi mind trick might be like nuclear weapons in a conventional in a war where conventional weapons are agreed upon, right? So
Oh,
that
that's
speaks to
interesting.
this idea of how Jedi's are conducting their war to save the galaxy. So their intent is good. They're trying to save the galaxy. Maybe they will succeed, but how they go about it seems problematic in the same way that you could win a war pretty easily if you just fired a nuclear warhead.
Right.
But there's something untoward about it. What's untoward is different, right? I mean, I don't between a nuclear weapon and a Jedi mind trick, but it speaks to this the manner of how you're conducting yourself.
Yeah.
All right, so I think this is the last one. Maybe we'll just skip so we can get sort of some closure because it looks like we're running up on 5:15. So to did anybody's mind change? Speaking of Jedi mind tricks, after thinking through at least these three considerations: the purpose of the Jedi mind trick, the effect of the Jedi mind trick, and the manner of its use or the circumstances of its use. As much as you can distinguish those three things, because they do all bleed together, which I think is one of Jaden's insights, is that a truly robust ethical analysis would require you to think about all three of those. But is there anybody's mind change through persuasion anyway on this?
Allison, I'm very curious about your mind because I feel like Varshita is firmly in place, and Jaden's on the other side. Maybe I'm wrong, but
no,
Allison,
I was gonna say that I was gonna. Well, should I continue?
yeah, go for it.
Okay, yeah. I was just gonna say that I don't think anyone should have that power, but if someone does have that power, then they can use it for the greater good.
Okay.
So initially, I was thinking that it's completely unethical for anyone to have that power and anyone to use it. But then if you are given that power, then it's not your fault, right? And as long as, well, since the Jedi are trained to be good people, I don't think everyone that's trained to be a Jedi is a good person, because Anakin and Darth Vader. But I don't know. I'm still a little unsure and hesitant, though.
Okay. Anyone else? That was a private message, Brett.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Let's
So
see.
Allison
I agree
agrees.
with Varshita. Jedi mind tricks should be used to benefit society. Okay. Okay. Interesting.
We have a Sith among us, right? The Jedi Order is
Mhm.
pretty dogmatic. That was Dooku's point, right? He left the Order because he didn't like it.
That's right. There's some interesting issues in the saga.
Yeah, there's a book for those of you who are interested. It's published by Blackwell, I think. It's a part of the Popular Culture and Philosophy series. There's at least one volume and maybe more devoted to Star Wars. So there's each chapter picks up a philosophical issue, a lot of ethics, but there's social philosophy. So it's a pretty easy read because it's pop culture. It's an application of philosophical principles to pop culture. So it's a text that is accessible and actually kind of fun to read. So
I think it's interesting though, because the original Star Wars, I think the original sort of complaint about Star Wars that it was just like good versus evil, right? Which is like, you know, I mean, and I'm not saying that and obviously it's totally evolved, right? But I think that that was sort of the original complaint. That's why seems that I lean a little bit more, well, not the only reason, a little bit more Trek, right? Where Chids is much more interwoven and complicated, maybe. But uh, yeah, but I do think that it's gotten more complicated with the more recent films and everything. But maybe it's not so simple as good and evil.
There you go.
yeah, it's a very Manichaean notion, right? So Saint Augustine,
Yes.
who in his later years came to understand evil as a negation, as an absence of good. In his younger days, he thought that evil was something battling good, which was something in that comes from this religious sect called the Manichaeans. And Star Wars is that, right? Because the Empire is a thing, and it is dark, and the Republic is something, and it is light, and they are battling it out.
Yeah.
So it's
I think that the later Star Treks kind of delve more into that really messy world of like the post-colonial, right, and the rehabilitation of colonial empires and what can be forgiven and what can't be forgiven, and like that. I think, I mean, obviously the original show was very basic in a lot of ways, but it is an interesting question of like what is evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, with that, we're going to wrap it up before it's just the three of us.
I know,
Star Trek and Star Wars and, then it's all that stuff.
Downward spiral into it's 9 o'clock at night and things are long gone, and that's
all right.
Well, thanks to those of you who engaged and stuck around, and thank you, Professor Fulkerson Smith, and good luck in the last week of school, everyone. Last 2.5 weeks.
Yep.
I do have one last thing to add, though.
Oh, okay.
I think another interesting point that would have been fun to argue was when they shot the ship at light speed at the fleet, and I forget.
Oh yeah.
But I think I remember watching a YouTube video on it, and like they said that would completely upend military ethics, because if people can just use one ship to like destroy like years of work, hundreds thousands of lives, and then with just one tiny ship.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to say.
Here,
well, that's a whole different issue. Medical or military ethics. That's for some other Wednesday.
Those of you who stick around, you can check out, cut and paste that link before you go. And that is, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Clerks, but there's a very funny dialogue in Clerks where they talk about whether it was cool to blow up the second Death Star because it was still being built, and so there were general contractors working there. And then there's a guy that's like, if you like, he gives an analogy. He's like, I got offered this job, but it turned out it was for a mob boss. I turned around and gave it to my friend. My friend got killed because they put a hit on the family. And he's like, you know the risks before you take the job. So enjoy it as a humorous addendum to our conversation.
All right. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you, sir. See you
Cool.
soon.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye. Anything we need to touch base on? Safa and Marion seem to be gone, so I'll hunt them down.
Sorry, other than being